man.
Hey there, Hazy. How are you?
I think sorry for the delay. Um, Too many commitments. Unfortunately. I was talking about this with my wife that, like, when they come home from school or when I get them early, I'm like, how was school? What's going on? Tell me about your day. And they're like, get out of here, dude. They're just like busy with their toys. And then when it's like bedtime in bed, hey Abba, can we be best friends? Can you tell me everything? Like, no, now is like it's not the time for that right now. So yeah, that they learn. And now and then you get these moments when they just really want to just, and it's the right time when they just want to talk and explore, and you see like these real little people that are there, and like a beautiful little mind developing. And that really is fantastic, because there are times that are difficult, but they are amazing. How have you been?
Um, Up and down. I mean, more down than up, but it's the kind of period that you do stuff not because you really feel like doing stuff, but because you kind of ought to.
Yep,
Um,
I hear that.
yeah. So,
And obviously there was I don't know, like, if this is framing your context, I'm sure it is, but right, we had this horrible, devastating loss of these three captives, which it's also, if obviously it would have been tremendous if we brought them home in one piece. There's also a level of, like, they were in a certain way that would have given like a validity also to like what we were doing, like, again, like, look, we actually got like people out like these many days in. I think the mother of one of the mother of one of the children that went to talk to the unit and like strengthen them, I think that is amazing. Like, we say Mika Amcha Israel, right? Like, it's just to see these powerful individuals. And again, as a nation, it's sad. The Torah very much believes in, um, or at least what I understand and what I've been taught, that during times of peace, it's v'chai bahem, right? You're really supposed to only participate in the Torah towards to magnify life, to live life. You're not supposed to be sacrificing yourself and giving of yourself because God wants you to participate in this world. However, during times of war, there is a sense where then you sort of it's not so much about the individual necessarily. Well, let me take a step back. Even the individual at that period of peacetime is he is being fully himself by recognizing how he wants to care for the other. And that's obviously we all want to be able to participate and care and pay it forward. However, during times of war, there is a sense where you become part of the collective and less about yourself, and that even means like giving yourself up for the collective, giving up your life for the collective. So this sounds this might be hard for people to hear, but in a certain sense, obviously you want to avoid war at all costs, but there is something horrible and beautiful at the same time, about it. And 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 how different it is, I want to say, from, let's say, teaching a child to give his life, as a shaheed. How different are we raising our children with our, you know, narrative of this is also worth giving your life for? And you see these soldiers over here, and I know people like, is one person's terrorist, another person's freedom fighter. Like, I obviously know the difference, and we know the difference, and but when you want to shine a light on how beautiful that is, that these soldiers, they're heroes, and these women and these mothers that understand and are going to the other soldiers and saying, like, don't be too hard on yourself. Like, we know that wasn't your intention. I don't think the women get enough credit. These men, so many of these soldiers are out there for so many days, 70 days, and these women are home with their children. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of women warrior soldiers out there and rah women. I didn't mean that in any way. But my only point is that I know it sounds like a cliche, like they're the spine, but really, these are righteous, fantastic women. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but since you brought it up, I think on the one hand, like when talking about the soldiers themselves in that situation, I mean, I can only dread at like the moment of realization of going through that. At the level of the army, that was a major mess up, right? Like that's, and it is disturbing, right? Like to see that sort of thing happen, and because
question the whole protocol.
Yeah, you kind of have to assume that when you see something, it's usually the tip of the iceberg, because by definition, most of the things are not gonna come out, right? Like whatever it is that comes out in these sorts of situations is going to be what you can't really hide, and even for good reasons, right? Like there's a lot of reasons why at war, both for morale and for public relations and everything related to that, you don't publish things that you don't have to. And when that sort of thing comes out and you read the preliminary investigation on how that happened, on how shots were fired, right? Like completely against protocol in this case. And you wonder about like the fact that these people are there with frayed nerves for weeks and even sometimes
Months.
over a month, right? I mean, just in a row, like without any refreshment. Because I don't think months. Like I don't think anyone has been there consecutively for 70 days.
No, but there's been people there that are there for extremely long stretches.
Yeah. So I'm saying,
it
could reach a month.
Either way, war is war. We're less talking about like the amount of days that they're there. Point is, like you're saying, yes, nerves.
Like the people that are there and how on edge they are, and how there are two preceding incidents that I think are relevant. One directly and one indirectly. One is the just days before that, I think it was 13 soldiers were killed in confrontation with terrorists, and that it was from the same unit. So it was the same soldiers that had. I'm not sure, like the same unit, but it was the same platoon or whatever it translates to.
So for them, even this space and this interaction, all this was to them was like already extremely tense.
Yeah, and they'd already experienced, their friends getting killed in that very context. So, I mean, that certainly puts that into light. But also, this was preceded by another heartbreaking and devastating tragedy where Yuval Kastelman was shot dead by an Israeli soldier. So this is there was a terrorist attack in eastern Jerusalem, and just for anyone listening to us, and a man who was on the other side of the road and had background in security forces and had a weapon immediately got out of his car and killed the terrorists that were shooting people. Then the soldiers that apparently were in a nearby bus stop started shooting towards where the terrorists were, where he was now at as well. He ran from some of the bullets. Then he got on his knees, took off his jacket, raised his hands, and begged for his life, shouting that
he threw out his wallet. He threw out his wallet as well, and with his ID card.
With his ID, to make sure that there's no misidentification. And he was still shot dead by 3 bullets by one of the soldiers, who later went and got an interview in Channel 14 saying how he went and took care of the terrorists, and how all the soldiers in Israel are all dying to mark an X on their weapon, to count the kills, right? And this was after the event, which apparently, despite what had happened, it only became clear to him later that he actually killed someone who was not the terrorist. The unquestionable elements, though, were that there was a man on his knees raising his hands, having taken off his jacket to show that there is no explosive device, right? And the case with the hostages also has some elements where the investigation shows that they were shirtless and were waving a white flag, and there were also signs, calling for help. But I don't think those are that relevant, because this is psychological warfare that Hamas is doing everywhere. And they were shot from a distance by, the first shots were fired from a distance by a sharpshooter. So not in a situation where, they already were thinking there was fire against them or anything. And those are very disturbing images, not because I'm saying these soldiers were necessarily, uncaring or did anything in ill intent, but there is something very off about an army that has, again, I don't want to stretch this to all of the army, but to the extent that it does stretch, that is an indication of something very, very deeply
off. Is that true, though? Very disturbing. We don't know. I'm saying how you have many civilians in Israel that carry weapons. There has been many terrorist attacks that have been stopped, and lives have been saved because of these individuals. Many times it's not a cop necessarily, right? It's just a man with a gun. We don't have many. The stats are not very high in Israel where you have these, civilians necessarily getting shot. However, clearly there's a protocol, right? And obviously, if the man, like you just said, I don't think he had any ill intent, right? Having said that, if he's in a situation that we could see on camera that the guy's getting down, he's throwing his thing out, then one has to real question, how quick is this person on the trigger? And you'd be like, well, listen, there's a lot of adrenaline running. Okay, but then I don't know, this guy, what's the protocol? This guy can't have a gun. We can't have people walking around just feeling willy-nilly ready to shoot. And
then the guy who shot Castleman was a soldier. He shouldn't have been a soldier, right? That's if we're making that claim, because this is not
we don't know. We don't know him yet necessarily, right? I'm going to just play this out, right? There could be soldiers make mistakes, obviously.
I just mean that this isn't in this case, the civilian with the weapon was the one who did save lives by taking out the terrorists. The issue was not this was this is also annoying because it was the response of, again, Netanyahu, which I don't even know if we want to talk about, but his response.
I think we can, but I feel like that's happening at a different level.
Yeah, but the thing is, this was framed as something about the question of whether we should give civilians more guns, which is a whole issue of how badly this is being done and how people from the ministry under Ben Gvir are saying like this, they're giving out guns like candy. But like that's not even the question. That's not even the framing. I think to me, Castleman's case, there's a direct line drawn from Elor Azaria to Val Castleman, right? Like Elor Azaria was a soldier who was caught on camera confirming a kill against a downed terrorist some years ago. I don't remember exactly when. And when that happened, he was tried, but he was widely supported, like made a political circus of by the right-wing politicians, by like basically all of the right wing, from Lieberman through Bennett to Netanyahu. Just
to be fair, there is a spectrum there of people that were, let's say, rah Elor Azaria to saying that clearly he should be tried, but like this, there's a difference though, and I think it's important, and maybe we'll disagree about this. What he did was his actions were wrong, and because of that, he serves to be in jail. However, I do not equate him at all with the terrorist that he shot.
Of course not.
And I think there were conversations sort of, but like, look how murderous this is, and like, I think
no, it's not. To me, that's not the point. I mean, we can agree on that and have a discussion where we agree, but to me, like that's not really the point. The point is, armies need to be able to enforce discipline, and both in Elor Azaria's case and in the shooter of Val Castleman, these are people, let's say, specifically in Elor Azaria's case, we don't know everything or enough right now about Castleman, but there's very disturbing signs from that interview that I was talking about. Like, these people who are supported by massive amounts of encouragement from a certain political party or certain political parties, even people within the government, to basically dish out the law in their own way, like saying all of the terrorists are bnei mavet, right? Like, sure, when they are a threat, right? The army has very clear rules. If there are
is Ismail Hanina a threat, even if he doesn't have a weapon?
The question of the killings of the higher ups,
yeah,
right, is completely different. I'm talking about within an army situation, like a fighting situation.
Oh, yes, you're saying like as far as a combatant, right? If
as a combatant,
I'm with you. Correct.
Yeah. So, and this is a very strong element in politics, especially since Elor Azaria saying like they deserve death. This is what we do. We kill them. Make sure, like the idea is like they are terrorists, and don't let someone else make that decision for you, right? To capture them, and then they'll put them in prison, and then there'll be some deal, and they'll get released. These are murderers. You should kill them, even if they surrender. Is the implicit in that, and in many cases the explicit.
Would you? Your issue, though, isn't necessarily the fact that this murderer / terrorist is being killed. It isn't. That he's dying.
I have no qualms with that. I have a qualm with, like, if you want to set a death penalty for terrorists, that's a decision that can be made by a country, right? But like, it's not, if that hasn't been decided, and you say like, I don't like that it's this way, so I'll take the law into my own hands.
Right, but it's not the Wild West.
Exactly. Right. And when it's Wild West, that's a real problem, especially for an army that is a folk army like Israel's.
So now, giving the Castleman example, right, where like this guy gets shot. Now, on one hand, And this is also in connection with, let's say, those photos that came out of all those terrorists in their underwear that Israel got like lambasted for. However, facts on the ground. They have hidden weapons before. There are different stuff on them. So now, arguably, you could say, let's say you don't see this interview on Channel 14, right? You could say, listen, I don't know. Did he think the guy had something on it? Now, again, you could be like, but he's speaking Hebrew and he threw his ID card. My point being is that, like, just because someone has his hands up, unfortunately, doesn't necessarily mean the situation's over.
Didn't say it's over. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. One example, right? If someone, let's say, is holding their hands up and you're suspecting that they are still, ready to fight, you can, at the very least, try to fire at the lower part of their body, a single bullet rather than 3 bullets to their, torso and head. Like that, those are the idea that is, being promulgated. Like, these are monsters, right? And you should treat them with as much rage, hate. These are not things that should be. I know that that's like not being said directly, but I'm saying
but it's more than even been said, because I think we should. That's why I was asking that previous question, which is like, they potentially are monsters and should be eradicated. Pause. As a society, we don't just kill people, and that's why there's a system of how something like this happens. That even someone like this, that in theory, right? Because the question is, we're saying right now, we're saying, like, the guy that's shooting this terrorist, again, through the system we have, he can't be going around shooting people that their hands are up. That doesn't mean, though, that at a certain level, this person isn't evil.
I mean,
I'm saying it's not necessarily.
He definitely could, like, the quote unquote deserve, but like, that's not, again.
Well, no, but that's the intention, though, because this person doesn't necessarily need to be painted as, like, I just want to clarify that this isn't, let's say, Arab bad. Rather, this is terrorist evil. And then, like, yes, terrorist is evil. Like, this is the person that, like it's a very thin line between, like, you should totally shoot him right now to don't shoot him.
Look, I want to point to a painful spot here, right? Because the murderer of the Wabsha family, right, like in Hawara village, right, is just as much a terrorist as our
no doubt. Yep.
And so is Baruch Goldstein and whatever. But
yeah, sure,
the standard by which we would judge someone who would, like, if the Shin Bet were on him and they would just shoot him and this would come out, then that wouldn't be, hey Jacob, that wouldn't be like something that our society could just accept as well. He was a terrorist, he was evil, right? There is an us versus them element there. Like, Arab terrorist, very bad. Jewish terrorist, well, we have to put him in jail, right?
Well, I mean,
that might make sense, and I don't like, that's something, that's a policy that a country can make, to say, like, we are in a state of war. These are our enemies, and things can be different, but, like, I don't think that we can ignore that element there.
But my pushback would be that it's far and few between are the examples where you just have that in Israeli society. That is the fringe. It's loud, and we discussed this in the past, where it's very, very disturbing that someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir, right, which you could say is a lot more versed in that crowd, a lot more comfortable in that crowd, has reached
convicted 8 times. I think 3 of them in terrorist accusations, like in aiding a terrorist organization.
So that is definitely a very concerning sign. And you could talk about that, whether that being like a trend of, like, the right in the world rising, or you could talk about that more specific combination of that and religious extremists. Regardless, though, the majority of the Israeli society and the majority of the religious communities in Israel, they completely oppose such behavior. And that's what you hear. Elor Azaria was a big deal because it's in the news. It's in the courts. You don't. I mean, right? We don't have any schools named after terrorists, right? They don't get none of these people get paid salaries. So none of our kids in school are being taught, right? So again, like it's internally, I think it's extremely important that we do that we question and we demand answers and we expect expect a moral system. Having said that, when like we have to be very careful when we make these comparisons because I do think Israel.
I wasn't making a comparison, right? What I was comparing was how we treat a person who is evil when he's from our own people compared to how we treat it from when he's an enemy. Like that's why I wasn't saying that they are the same. I was comparing the way we treat them, and my point being, right, regardless of whether you see him as the embodiment of evil or not, there's a reason why this isn't the Wild West. And all I was saying is the example of the Jewish terrorist in this case is meant to bring up the sort of emotional response that you would have for that compared to the emotional response you would have for something like Elor Azaria's case. And obviously, well, not obviously, my sense is that we should have that in mind when we see ourselves, conducting ourselves in that manner with our enemies, because like it's a slippery slope once you allow yourself to do that.
But don't you find, and Jacob, you could jump in a moment. Don't you find though that generally speaking, what you hear and obviously you might disagree, that the army does talk about constantly how it wants to be this moral army and its standards that it upholds for itself and how careful they are and all these things that they want for the Arab population and the Palestinian people. So like, while you could point out and saying like, look how problematic this was, or even go to the extreme and say, we're so down to potentially shoot someone, even if it's someone that's a redhead without his shirt on in the middle of Gaza, holding up a sign saying like, help me. Right now, again, we obviously know it's no Israeli soldiers holding up a gun laughing like, I'm going to kill this Jew right now, right? Like, that's not the conversation that's happening. But then you're like, 1 second, okay, we know he didn't do that, but if it was just like an Arab walking around with his shirt out, shirt off, holding a sign saying OSS, would he
wouldn't hear about it? That's my point.
So my pushback on that is, do you really think that I started the stream by saying, like, look at these heroes we have. Do you think these people, and with the social media that you have today, and everyone has a phone, do you think all these soldiers and your neighbors and your friends and these people that I talked to that I seen the weekend, no one would be telling me, yo, Chazi, it's crazy. We're just gunning down civilians. We're just like, have no idea.
No, I don't think that's the case. But I think, like, first of all, going on previous wars, on previous cases, the testimonies that you hear later, even from personal acquaintances, like, there are cases where good people in a bad system can do very bad things, and the Kfar Qasim massacre is one example where it was an extreme case, going on past events. But even, just in the normal, day-to-day activities within war, the extreme situations that people are put in require extreme discipline. That's what an army needs to do. And I think, like you said, if Israel was so, uncaring about civilian casualties, then we would see so much worse damage to Gaza and to the civilians there. I don't think that's the case. I think like the potential for damage if we had, I don't know, similar morals to what Russia perpetrated in Mariupol, for instance, then I think the death toll would have been easily 5 or even 10 times higher at this point. I mean, though that's regardless of a very tragic historical event, a recent historical event. So yeah, I think that's the case. But I do think that there are trends, and there are what I'm most disturbed by is that this sort of politics is trying to get in and actually does that by subverting the very foundations of what it needs in order to be an effective army. And this can lead to the killing of the hostages. This can lead to friendly fire instances that have also, in all of the wars in history, have been plentiful, right? Like things need to run better, and that sort of extreme example is something that points to a real problem. And when I see, the sort of response on the right sphere of the internet to that event, I think like I have never seen, let's say, a repentance in general, and in this case, not either. Like everything they have is like somehow now the people who are investigating the Castleman case are guilty, and the people who are saying that the soldiers didn't act by protocol are guilty, and anyone who's not praising every action we do is somehow a traitor from within, right? And I think like if we see these people as heroes, then it's a part of our duty to make sure that things that need to be resolved will be resolved, because we don't need to put our heroes in a situation where they end up shooting the people they want to save.
Yakubim.
So there's a modern Hebrew term I love, which is zelofer. Zelofer. And there's a reason why zelofer has to be in English. Because fair isn't part of the Jewish experience. That's not what it means to be a Jew. It's not going to be fair. That's not what we do. That's not how we live. That's not who we are. Ivri Anochi. Right? And to be Jewish means saying, yes, I am held to a higher and better and different standard. And the fact that it's not fair is up to God to rectify. And Eile berecha ve'eile besusim, right? That it's not with our guns. It's not with the Air Force. It's not Tzahal. It's this idea of a secular Zionism and materialistic, humanistic Zionism is a bankrupt idea that would never work, that will never work, has never worked, cannot work. Zelo fair. Get used to it. But it hits at your Zionist. We're a superpower. We're a superpower. Our only superpower is our yeshivot and our tefillot and our Torah and the Talmud. That's our only superpower. There are no nuclear weapons that can save us from this. Zelo fair.
I'm happy you're here, Jacob.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We discussed this a bit on the server, and I'm not sure like how much like we want to get into this and how to sort of like manage this three-way dialogue.
Well, let's say it like this, because obviously the fact that both Gilad and I live in Israel, right? I think we both know where we're sitting on that. And I mean, Gilad and I discussed this a little.
Well, you're not a secular Zionist, right?
Correct. So I was going to say, like, I feel like I'm somewhere like in the middle in a certain sense, where, I mean, I see the secular obviously ultimately as, you know, this is a tool, this is a vehicle that is still very, like, needs to be used and to develop into a much greater and ideally a more clearly divine manifestation of what it's supposed to look like. And so when I come and say that terms like Atchalta de Geulta, or that, like, you know, the holiness of the nation of Israel, I have no problem also taking that in the context of you know, the Gemara talking about the kingdom of the Hasmoneans was 200 years. Because there's something about respecting the concept of the kingdom. That doesn't mean we don't have a tremendous amount of criticism on the house of Hashmonai, and how horrible it was that the priests took the crown of Kahuna and mixed it together with the crown of Malchut, and you had completely devastating results. One, you had completely horrible leadership because they did not know how to run a political system. And two, you had a loss of identity, religious identity, because you had this mixture going on. And you could see elements of that today. And I definitely have a lot of blame towards, there's blame enough to go around everywhere. But my point being, Jacob, that if you're looking for someone to come and say, like, no, Israel's perfect, of course not. And
no, but Chazi, my question, when people ask me what should the people in Gaza do, I tell them honestly that if I were a human being living in Gaza with children, I would take my children and I would leave, because a piece of land is not worth my life. And I say that as somebody who knew Kobe Mandel's father.
Jacob, that's fine. So you know what? Like, you know, we could go all the way to saying dismantle all the settlements, but you're not we're in 2020, almost 2024. The people are living over here. So we have to talk, you know, have a mission statement going towards the future. And when I think of the mission statement that Rashi gives calling Shema Yisrael, part of that mission statement ultimately comes back to us being in this land. To me, that sounds like probably the right direction. That doesn't mean it manifests as the Haredim are going to hope. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to manifest how the seculars are going to hope. But being in the land where the story's happening, that's to me like pointing north. And you and I have had this discussion about maybe we are too early. I definitely don't want to be too late.
Why?
I just want to jump in, just to say that I'm not sure, like, if this is the discussion, I'm not sure if I really have a place in it.
So let's not have this. We could let's.
I mean, I'm okay with it. Okay with it, but I want to just go ahead.
Gilad, my question is the same to you. Like, why? And frankly, there's a reason why so many people who are from your camp have left Israel and are living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the question,
but like I said to Chazi, right?
Yeah,
and I think this is something you might disagree with me on, and I think a lot of people tend to have your opinion. But I can say is that, like, my Zionism, right? I don't call myself a Zionist. I was born here. No, I mean, I was born here. And the things that I care about, the ways that I can do the most good that I can perceive, right? The manner in which I can contribute the most I can to this world in my life are here at the moment. That may change, right? And I've spoken to Chazi in our first conversation that, you know, if and when I may have kids, I might go like, well, you know, this isn't a place where I want to raise my kids. I don't know. I don't have kids at the moment. But like for now, the reason that I'm here is not because of, and that's why I think like I don't know if I have a place in this discussion, because I don't look at it in the framing of like the ideas that could have been a better idea, but as a practical thing, like what happens now? I'm here. Israel is here. What is the best outcome I can think of? What is the best direction to move forward? And we talked about it in the server that I don't see like the disappearance of Israel as something that would be positive. Like there are 10 million people here in Israel and plus the region, and I don't think it would stop the wars. And I don't think like that would. I don't see any way in which that's a good thing. I think there are a lot of ways in which Israel should change its path in order to bring about more peace and less animosity and less death. And that's where I focus on. So I'm just not sure where that meets with you. And I tried to kind of get you. Maybe you can.
So this is where when I start talking with people who aren't Jewish, they start calling me a Zionist. Right? So I am perfectly serious when I say that the reason I want Hamas gone is not solely because of the threat that it has for the Jews living in Eretz Israel, but for the Gentiles.
For sure.
When you realize that those kids, that the people, there's that guy who goes around calling himself the son of Hamas, right? It's the Green Prince or something, right?
Musab Hassan.
Yeah, and it's not out of a love for Israel, really. It's because he saw how Hamas treated Muslims and Palestinians, right? And if the Jewish way of looking at it was not, oh, I wish all of these Gazans would die, which is what plenty of Jews all over Israel wish.
That's just not true.
More than comfort.
Disappear. Let's hope
the Gazans.
Yeah, they would just disappear. They would just disappear.
They would want that problem.
Millions of people should just disappear. If they could snap a finger, and millions of people could just disappear.
Just to sort of mediate between the two of you, I think that is looking at like opinion polls now. You would see a peak in that, like a very sharp rise. That in all of conflicts in history, that's something that happens. But I don't think that is the representative. But like I said with Chazi, the fact that Ben Gvir and Smotrich together have 14 mandates, which sum up to 12% of the counted votes, and that the Likud party is getting as massive support as it is, that is, I agree with you that is far more people than I would consider comfortable with, that actually have these sorts of genocidal ambitions and even like the way they talk about it. So not only like hidden.
Large numbers of Jews will talk about Palestinians being Amalek. They will. Large numbers.
Even Bibi Netanyahu, that spoke about Amalek, right, did not speak about the Palestinian people being Amalek. He also didn't talk about the Gazans being Amalek. He spoke about Hamas being Amalek, and we could talk about how that's still a wrong term. He's a buffoon. He shouldn't be prime minister. It's all good. And unfortunately, this is not said enough by Israeli leadership and religious leadership. But there's only love for Ishmael. Ultimately, he has to come back into the tent of Abraham, and that's why they're not going anywhere, and nor do they need to go anywhere, because this is like they're in this land as well, and it's all hunky dory.
But Chazi, like I hear you, and I believe you, but like my question is, because when you represent that, like your end of the spectrum, and like obviously you don't agree with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, but I mean, obviously, you agree that there are some people that have Jacob's opinion, because in any country there are some people that would have,
Correct.
that some people. Like the question that I think is relevant here is how large is this phenomenon, and I'm not sure, like, whether I have the correct estimation of it or you do, because you seem to be saying that it's less than I think, and I seem to be, pushing it further. I mean, to me, it's much, much, much more than I would consider.
The fact Itamar Ben-Gvir is seated in the Knesset, much less a minister in the government, is mind-boggling.
We need to be fair, though, and I need, Gilad, you would agree that one of the reasons why he's at the position is due to 5 rows of election, not BB. Like, this is a not natural coalition, and I'm not saying that it's not indicative of other trends. However, Bibi, that's not a natural partner for him, and in many cases he was pushed, and we know that there was deals that fell apart, and we know that Ben-Gvir had to connect with and hijack the term National Zionism and that whole party. So it's horrible that we are where we are today. But nevertheless, even Donald Trump, right? This is a result of a corrupted system constantly manipulating itself. So it's not like one day Israeli people woke up and said, now 14 mandates of us want Itamar Ben-Gvir. It's he got in to be able to lock in a coalition because people were locked into it could only be right or left. And specific about what you said, Gilad, about, if the numbers are with me, if they're with you, unfortunately, we know that there's, you hear about woke, and then how much of that is pushed on social media, and how much does Fox News just focus on that? And on the flip side, you have, how many anti-Semites or fascists are there in America? Same thing over here, right? When you just hear and you have news and you have politicians, and we spoke about how completely corrupt the whole.
Chazi, correct me if I'm wrong. Itamar Ben-Gvir had a picture of Baruch Goldstein in his living room.
I understand. He's a bad dude.
Then what's he doing in the Knesset?
One second.
No, 1 second. What's he doing in the Knesset?
You're right. He shouldn't be there. Just like many of the Arab parties, right, that are apartheid, horrible, anti-Arab country built up, right? You're going to allow there to be people like Azmi Bashara that was a terrorist that we still pay his salary, right? Now you're in a country that has this built-in conflict, and yes, you have a system that allows minority voices to get a tremendous amount of seats in the Knesset. So a lot of this is due to the system we have, and it's horrible that we're in this place, for sure. And I think it's crazy that Ben-Gvir was not removed from any position of power up until now.
Let me try to also respond to why I think Ben-Gvir is in the Knesset, which, I couldn't agree with you more, and I've been saying it in every opportunity I can, right? Like it is beyond belief, right? Like he's literally convicted of terrorism, and he is the minister of the police, right? Like that, there is a terrorist criminal in charge of the police. Like that cannot be, overstated. It is insane. Now, the way that this has happened, if you're curious about like why this is the case, then there are a few reasons for that. One, like in the general picture, I think once when you see all over the world, the phenomenon of trying to exclude more and more, like you try to exclude the Nazis, let's say, and then like, okay, but if you're racist, you should also be excluded. Oh, if you're against illegal immigration, you should be excluded. Well, if you're against immigration in general, etc. Right? And then there's not enough of a consensus to create the exclusion of the real extremes. Like that's a phenomenon that I think happens, and I think it's generally that is something that should be laid at the feet of the left more than the right. Like that is happening. When you talk about the specifics here in Israel, like I've spoken to a few people who voted for Ben-Gvir. So you have massive amounts of ignorance. Like they just don't know. That is a surprising amount of people, which is like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. How can you vote for a criminal without even knowing that he is a criminal? But that is the case with like every anecdote that I've seen of someone who's saying like, yeah, he seems like he's going to be like tough guy or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, the level of stupidity that goes behind that is imperceivable, but it is the case in many instances I've seen. And
that means they're not racist then. I mean, I don't necessarily know what that means they're not racist. It just means their attitude is not, let's just get rid of every Arab.
The left has been overstepping this for many years, in the United States as well. But it's shocking to me how the left in Israel has collapsed. How many mandates do all the leftist Jewish parties have? 20?
Depends how you count left. I personally think they have currently less, significantly less.
How has the entirety of the left, when you have a one-party state, it's a failed political state. So Israel is a failed political state.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a part of this is what we were discussing with Chazi about the anyone but Bibi campaign that has been going on sporadically since actually 1999 was the first time that it came out, which is, I didn't even realize that. But
very successful.
Very
successful so far.
Yeah, very successful so far. And the issue I have, like, again, the only people I can really criticize are the people that I'm closer to, and that's why I have so much criticism to the left. Like, I think if I had to dish out blame, I think the right is more to blame because, right, it's in charge. It is doing the things, right? It is promoting the policy. But the way I see it, right, there's two elements to that. One is, you could say, a sort of, which is the bad part, moral bankruptcy that is common, I think, to all of like the humanist movements all over the world that just traded in actual values that people fought and died for moral relativism, basically. And that has been frustrating to no end to see happening. But the other part of that is kind of like the last ditch effort, which like you're stuck on, to say like okay, like we lost. We're not gaining political power. We can't even influence policy. But this thing, like what's going on, exemplified or embodied by this politician, like you have to at least, give us the bit of sanity. You can see that this is untenable. This is going to lead us to disaster. And I think like that attempt, I can see where it's coming from. Like, I think the intention, I feel it myself, and I would be willing like to get behind it. I just think it's like the worst strategy to actually get it done, and it has proven itself as the worst strategy, throughout all of this time. Like, if you don't have an alternative, if you can't come up with a positive message to say, actually, this is what we want to promote, right? Which hasn't happened since. By the way, how did the Bibi get in power? Rabin was assassinated, right? Like that was the last case that someone, you can agree or disagree with the idea, but someone had an actual alternative, an idea of what should happen now that wasn't Bibi. Ever since then, everyone is just trying to say, hey, I can be Bibi instead of Bibi. I have the same exact idea of what needs to happen, but I'm not him. Right? That's why I'm saying, like, it's very hard to count mandates on the left, because the people that are opposition are just more of the same intention and policy, just saying, like, why don't I get to be in power now?
I have to go. Just one final thing. If you don't have a vision like Gilad is talking about for the future, which the left doesn't in Israel and really doesn't in the United States either, ever since I actually think it comes from the fact that that the Soviet Union collapsed and the left realized, oh, we were wrong, and they haven't reformed. You're not going to be able to do anything, get anything done. We have to go back to having a positive vision, and that does not mean that everybody who wants to go back and take a look at where things were in the 1940s and 50s and restart from there, or there's something on the left. There's a reason I call myself a conservative for so long, and I've basically stopped doing that because I thought, hey, I look at what the left's doing and it's obviously wrong, so I must be a conservative. No, I'm not a conservative. I just realized that the left has to recognize defeat, just like the Gazans need to recognize defeat, just like the Zionists need to, like, recognizing defeat and moving on is really, really important. And there are too many people who just want to keep on fighting rather than being accepting, hey, we lost this one. I'm going to take it from, I'm taking the ball from where it is, and I'm trying to move it forward. Too much of, no, we have to keep on going the way we were. And I have to go. Bye. Have fun, guys.
Bye, Jacob. I was wondering as he got on, I'm like, how's this going to play out? It was pretty good. I think we survived his wrath. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah. I think it's okay. I was not worried so much about Jacob's wrath, but just like I said about the conversation taking a theological turn, which I think is.
I mean, we don't have to go too deep into that, but I obviously, as he's giving that dichotomy of left and right, am I right wing? Because you and I also discussed about, like, would you be considered left compared to, like, left in America? Because right, so right, you're more like you said, like, more capitalist. That's why the Soviet Union, I think, has less, its fall has less to do with, let's say, the way you see Israel's left manifesting here. But it relates both to Jacob and to, I think, to the state of Israel. But ultimately, I think, like, all this, undergirding all of this are theological undercurrents, and that's why, and that theology can manifest, I think, for us to be able to jive together, right? It's either I'm expecting you to have some sort of epiphany, or on the flip side, at the very least, I'm trying to serve up to you a version of religion that somehow seems appealing to modern day secular Jews, and ideally also manifest then to the world. So I very much think, that's a lot of the tension with Jewish and democratic. That's the tension of all this land, right? The Palestinians. So to me, there's no avoiding that. And going back to what Jacob said about a lot of people on the left end up leaving the country, and I totally understand that if the security of one's child, but we have our famous song, "In the Eretz Acheret, Gam im admati bo'eret," right? I have no other country, even if the land I'm on is on fire. And again, like, you could look at that being like, well, isn't that intense to teach a little kid? And you could be like, well, that's also what the Ukrainians are fighting for. Maybe, but I mean, my son knows he's here not because he was just born over here, right? I don't see him as he is a boy born to Jewish parents. Rather, I see him as a Jewish person, part of a lineage, and in his ancestral homeland, which, like you said, or Jacob was saying with, and I think you were agreeing with some of it, comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. One where you have to expect a higher standard from yourself, and we should be looking into these shootings, and that standard would demand Itamar Ben-Gvir not being at the position of power he's in, and it would demand.
So let's start with that standard, because I think it's kind of binds a lot of the things you were talking about together. It is very automatic for me to say that I cannot have the standard to my behavior set by my enemies. Like, that's not the comparison to, well, we're better than the people we're fighting. Like, that has no weight for me, right? Because they can't be setting the standards. The standards have to come from somewhere else, from somewhere higher than that. And I think that relates to the fact that, which we've talked about before, like, I can be interested in many different religions and cultures and religious practices, and I can follow whichever of them I want. But having grown both to my family and here, there are things that just, they are a part of who I am as a result of that. And I think, having studied Judaism, I realized where a lot of those things come from. To me, that, like, the notion that I can say, okay, like, the fact that these moral standards that I have actually are rooted in something deeper, or even just in something that has a long lineage and a lot of writings about and a lot of sources to sort of go to when discussing them, that is a huge privilege, right? That is a fantastic thing to have, where you can say, like, I'm not stranded in this kind of period of time and space where, like, nothing can guide me. There's a lot of.
It's a great antidote to the meaning crisis.
Maybe. I don't know if I want to frame it that way.
All right.
I think, right.
Good thing I said it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't think, because I do want to stress the point. You were asking me recently, when was the last time I was in a synagogue, right? And
on the
privately, not on our conversation. You were asking, like, when was the last time, and I don't really remember. It was someone's bar mitzvah at some point. It was definitely years ago, and I was thinking, like, what would that take for me to go to a Bet Knesset. And I've been to the Knesset, and every time I was there, like, and this relates to something John Vervaeke talks about a lot, which I think is unique and very important for this little corner, and not discussed enough. That there are people, and I feel like I'm one of those people, for whom a return to religion is not livable. You can talk about it, you can like consider it, and I really did like after our chat then. But there's something about it that just like it's not the cultural language that I grew up in. It's not. It doesn't resonate with me in the same way. I don't have the taste for it. I don't have the like spiritual connection to it. And to me, like the best example I could think of, right? Why is it hard for me to put on kippah? Was interesting because I think it still comes from even then a Jewish origin, because it's lasot sheker benafshi. Right? I don't believe in this, and like to just say, okay, well, it's your culture, I'll respect you, I'll just do it. It's like that feels wrong, and it feels wrong, I think, and you can tell me if that seems the same to you. Like in a way, if you were invited to dinner by a Gentile family while visiting Korea or whatever, and they would offer you food that's not kosher, right? And you wouldn't want to eat that food because you are so shekel b'nafshecha, and it's not like, and to me, like that was a realization that I thought was interesting, in the sense that I want to be able to communicate with you. Like we're talking, obviously I'm here because I find this important. But the place where like how that takes shape, how that conversation happens, and what kind of level of how to phrase it, like how much the form of that, the actual practices, the halacha of that, if you want, is rigid, is where I think we differ. Because I don't see a contradiction, with you talking with people like that see Brenner and Trumpeldor and whatever, like all of these, massive figures as role models. And I think like that's where I see, like, you can think of me, I don't know if it works because I don't know enough about it, but like to think of people, even Jews living in Israel, as in some ways like Noahides, right? Like I think can be beneficial rather than sort of the more uniform view of it. Like you should be more religious. You should go towards.
I was gonna say I couldn't agree more. So I'm gonna say that because that's my knee jerk reaction. But I agree. There's gradations to it, but there is definitely also in historical context. There's always been the house of Judah and the house of Israel, and there's always been some that have been more extremely more observant, and others that haven't. And the question is, can we, in a certain way, all be elevated, but yet return to, in a certain sense, a more spectrum version of our religion? There's a term we use a lot, which is in Orthodox circles called someone is off the derech. Someone is off the path, right? So did you hear what happened to Joey's son? He's off the derech right now. He's mixed with the bad crowd. And I believe that our religion offers a wide enough path for it to be very, very difficult to want to be off that derech. So you saying like, listen, Chazi, there's parts of me that recognize that I look back at my roots and I see that where these things are stemming from and where these things are coming from. Obviously, that's beautiful to see, and having that rich culture is amazing to see, and the rich religion is amazing to see. And there's something about Jacob saying like Ivri Anochi, that to me that rings very true. There's something about that, which is 2000 X years ago we got kicked out of our homeland. It's been a very long route, but we had one goal in our mind, which is to come back, and that is part of obviously our story. Now, it's fortunate and unfortunate that while we managed to maintain a tremendous amount of our religion and our culture and our history, you have right now in Israel, and this is part of the irony, right? You're almost there, yet you've in a certain sense are very far away, because what you look at, and I'm saying this generally, as let's say Judaism or religious manifest is, the ultra Orthodox, or how it's manifest, let's say I know you've studied religion as well. I'm saying how you see it affecting your life in the day to day, like its effect on policy in Israel. That's where I think like the rub comes in, right? And you and I have discussed many times where I think, a Medinat Halacha, or like a theocratic state, so to speak, it's a red herring to say that turns into Iran, because that's not the future I'm looking for, and that's not the future I understand from the text I read that the world is looking for. However, it does require, at the very least, from people like you, and you have done this, but not all have done this, to really look and search and see and understand their origin and understand these ancient texts, right? So you have an ear that is a lot more sensitive to this and could appreciate a lot more of these things, and vice versa, right? Like you said.
Just one thing about that, right? I've spoken to a lot of, like in my circles in the university, there was a lot of people who, like secularizers, I don't know, datlashim, people who were religious and became secular. And the thing that's surprising to me is how little they know of their own roots, right? Like they are usually, like, naturally when I talk about things, like Talmud stories come up because they're relevant for a lot of things that happen. And the chance that someone who was religious knows of these Talmud stories is next to zero. Like, they just look at me like, where do you get that from, right? Like, and to me, like, I don't know what to make of it. I say that it's surprising, but
I mean, my answer to that would be that the majority of datlashim are coming from more ultra Orthodox homes, and there are as a more specific regimen of what they study. And I quote Rav Kook when he says that the Talmud was the great band-aid of the exile. Or others rabbis have talked about famously how, the Kabbalah teachings, the mystical teachings, are what are called davar gadol, the great thing, what we should be focusing on. And Talmud is really more of, let's say, the entree. And in a sense,
by the way, in that case, I'll let you continue. But I always see myself as a parod, right? So in Pardes, I don't go to the Sod,
right?
Which I think is
that's where it gets crazy, bro.
Yeah, but like for me, whenever I encountered it, I was like, I get why all of these things have to come before Sod. Like, right. Until I'm really sure that I need to go there, I shouldn't. And to me, like, that's also a cheapening that I see, like people who have no idea about the Perid,
right?
But go like, oh, actually, Kabbalah says that. You don't understand Kabbalah. Like, I definitely don't understand, but I can tell you for sure that you don't.
So, first of all, Pardes is an acronym from Pshat, Drash, Raz, Sod, and these are different levels of interpretation of our texts, just as far as what anyone's listening. Secondly, there's a famous story of the four who entered the Pardes, Rabbi Akiva and his crew. One dies, one goes crazy, one, being Rabbi Akiva, comes out peacefully, and one is a student, Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, who later is dubbed the other. And this is a hint to the conversation happening at the time of two powers in heaven. He sees Metatron on the chair, the throne of God, and he gets very confused and he becomes a heretic. Now, like you said, one should, the words the rabbinic literature uses is lemaleh karso, right? To fill your belly with the perid first before you go into the deep end. One needs to learn how to swim. And Rabbi Akiva famously tells them, when you go inside and you enter this this enlightened state slash well, we don't have to get in like what induced these states. Either way, he says, when you see these pillars of water, al tumru ma'im, right? Don't assume you comprehend what you see, right? There's more than meets the eye. So I couldn't agree more. Having said that, there is a sense where in today's day and age, Vervaeke's teachings are butting up against with that, and Platonic teachings are butting up against with that, and a lot of this conversation, and we're in a time today where we need to be tapping into these traditions, whether it's the Sufis, whether it's the mystical church fathers, whether it's the Kabbalists, and trying to understand and have a conversation which allows us to come to greater understanding of each other, greater understanding of the other as well. And that's why you're right that people need to arm themselves with quote unquote Talmud and Bible as far as understanding these roots. But at a certain time, you have to, if you're being told, and we're being told that that's where the depth is. And that's where seemingly you start having a conversation which is a lot more fluid and a lot more open and a much less rigid in some senses. You at some point need to make the leap. And I always say that we can't be in an exile mentality while being back in the land. And all of these are motions of that, right? Because you could imagine what it's like if many of the religious leaders in Israel were talking in a much more open and understanding manner, right? And being a lot more sensitive to the community needs. And again, all within the system, right? I'm not calling for, let's say, just, willy-nilly do whatever you want. But reform and conservatives are all reactions to the slow reaction of orthodoxy, and how this web needs to slowly and meticulously move around because it's all interconnected. And there's,
I mean, I don't want to cut you off if you want to finish.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm, as far as I can be from giving advice to Orthodox or, even Reform community leaders, I'm just saying, like, the question of how they should do it and how, like, that should inform their choices is not the same as saying, like, now everyone should read Kabbalah. And I think, like, even when we talk about Vervaeke, like, I get all of his work about psychedelics and stuff, but I don't want to do psychedelics, right? I can practice meditation, and that is, a sort of much like slower path towards wherever you want to go. And I think that is a practice that's been useful for me. But there's also an element that I see is, it's like, ever since the American 1960s, right? Like the psychedelic revolution, there's something about it that's, I think, fetishism in a deep way. Like even the research, the latest research into psychedelics shows that without a proper framing and a proper guidance,
Right.
and everything, it can be more harm than good.
Like we said, there's three other outcomes in that story of the pardes, right?
Yeah.
None of them are necessarily desirable. You could argue that the heretic really opened up his eyes, but I agree. I agree with you. And also, this is not an invitation for everyone to go and become a hermit, right? And sit in their room and now just get lost in the different spheres. Right. Having said that, there's something about these teachings, right? That Jung talks about how the Mega Numerists, right, like predated a lot of his teachings. Where going to a therapist and being able to recognize who you are and have a discussion about your ego. All of those are things that I believe, the Bible is already alluding to. And over many, many years, we try to find the language and the psychotechnology of how to bring these things out. So I'm definitely not telling like people to get on the psychedelic train. However, I'm saying that at some point you need to take your face out of the book and actually start manifesting and living and doing. And I just wanted to say,
okay, go ahead.
Just about what you said about the Noahide movement, right? So it's interesting that the Rambam makes a distinction between someone that keeps the 7 Noahide laws because of his just intellect, as in recognizing and tapping into, let's say, what he believes to be moral, and one who does so because he believes that this ultimately stems from Moses, even if it predates Moses. The idea that it stems from the lawgiver and the law being God's law, right? And in a certain sense, we don't have to get into like the actual halachic breakdown and consensus in the end. But initially, Rambam says that you're only considered a ben Noach if you do so with the recognition that this comes from Moses. There are other people with different opinions. Now, and then there's a conversation with Bnei Noach, which is you could elect to take on more responsibilities if you want to. And that varies with how much that is and what they could do. I do agree with you that is a model that I believe was and should be again reinstated in a certain sense in Israel itself and to Jews around the world itself, which is off the bat, we don't keep all the 613. Some are relevant to priests, some are relevant to women, right? They're not all for me to do. And then there's the ones that I don't get to do anyways because I can't do them because are the time and space we live in today. And then there's the things that all of us pick and choose ultimately. And one wants to strive and do, but even the ones that pick and choose because we're humans, I'm still part of the congregation. I don't get kicked out of the synagogue. I don't get spit on. I don't get called like my daughter could still marry his son. So there's a sense where why can't I offer a not an olive branch, but more than that, like as we say, the Torah is left in the corner. Anyone who wants it is willing to come and take it, right? So if Gilad wants to come and say, like, listen, I'm really into like these 9, great. You know what I mean? Like, good on you, dude. And that's a spectrum and a conversation, which I definitely think, and people should recognize and have a conversation. There's a writer called Yoav Sorek who he was quite influential in the Makor Rishon newspaper, and he decided, he's a religious person, and he decided to observant person, and he decided to remove his kippah, his skull cap. He doesn't wear it anymore. And the reason he does so is a statement to say that I don't think we should be recognized anymore in Israelis as like, oh, he's religious because he has that, and he's not observant because he doesn't have that. Rather, that we should all be seeing each other as observant on some sort of spectrum. So I very much resonate with that, and I definitely think that should be a conversation. It's scary for people to have.
There's an article, I don't remember who the writer is ever, but there's an article about the difference between a conversation of rights to a conversation of identities, where the author is talking about like conversation of rights only ends in compromise. Like I stay me, you stay you, and it's really costly to go to war. So let's do what, kind of works enough for each of us. And that's that. And there's a conversation of identities, which means I put on the table like the depths of my, soul of who I am, of my position in the world, and you can do the same, and we can actually have a dialogue, and from that dialogue, what's going to come out is different from what came in. And the thing about a conversation of identities that he talks about is, like, you generally shouldn't do it willy-nilly, because, right, if you're entering from that place and the other side is entering from a forceful place, let's say, or from anywhere that's not like reciprocating that, like there is just as much chance that something would die from that interaction than that something would be born. And this comes back to the video you sent me of a rabbi that you're close to.
Shirky, yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot we we could still discuss that, I guess. Yeah, maybe for next time. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, if you need to go, then probably.
Not yet, like soon, but go on, please continue.
So it was an interview where he was talking about this organization that was a protest organization from the Reserve Army people protesting against the government actions. And then as the war started, they became what they call a civil war room, and they've been trying to basically create all of the logistic structure to provide for all of the lackings that the country like couldn't provide, from military equipment to units up to evacuating people in settlements that were in danger, to providing them with their necessities. And like I volunteered in there. It was a very impressive operation. And you sent me this interview to show something like that. You said that this is someone you're close to. You generally agree with his points.
Well, just to clarify, I don't have a political relationship with him. I have specifically the relationship, which is like, I am very into the Torah he teaches, and I'm into the Noahide movement that he oversees.
Yeah.
So it's not like I don't have my conversations with him or about him are never political.
Okay.
However, he's been vocal in this current war, and then yes, I sent you like that interview. Yeah.
So I'm not trying for me he is not like, I'm not trying to say anything about him. I don't know him, and I don't feel that he's like the issue, but as a vehicle to talk about the problem that I see. So my impression, speaking with you, is that we can both realize that we are coming short of the truth, right? If we're both here and the truth is somewhere there, right, then if we leave a conversation going this way or even going this way, then that's great. But if we try to just convince each other of something, like that means I'm trying to pull you here, or you're trying to pull me there, and the truth sort of loses out, right? We definitely, if you're trying to convince someone in a conversation, you're not getting closer to truth. You might be pulling him up or something, but like you're not moving, right? At least your intention is not. And what I saw in that interview is that sort of approach. Like, he went to a meeting with these people that he deeply disagrees with, and he was saying like, it's like judo, you need to use their power against them. And he was saying,
well, in politics.
What?
In politics.
He didn't qualify it. I'm just, when he was saying like, that's how he was treating it. He was treating it as politics, and the notion was, right, oh, so they're doing these. I'm giving a few examples just to give the layout for people listening. So they're doing these very impressive things, but it's for an ulterior motive. And he said it's secondary. The interviewer said maybe it's their main motive. Only the political thing. He said that he is posel otam lachalutin, so completely sees them as illegitimate. But even when you completely see them as illegitimate, you should not completely exclude them, because that somehow gives them power. And eventually he said about the leader of this organization, so he was willing not to wear the shirt because he wanted something early, so maybe he could be harnessed to agendas that I am more connected to somehow. That's exactly who I feel like. Why should I, this is war, right? This was a meeting specifically designed to create dialogue. Immediately after that meeting, going out and saying actually, I was there to do judo with them, and then.
Well, to be fair, I mean, what he said was that they came out with a statement about something that happened there that didn't actually happen, and then he's like, once they said that, then I came out saying okay, if we're gonna play it that way, then these are my thoughts, right? He came and said we got to this agreement that we're only gonna make major decisions with a consensus. And he's like, when that discussion never happened.
First of all, like I told you, that was the one point where I agreed with him, and I think it's just a bad thing to do. I know what they were referring to, and like the phrasing was, one of the rabbis there said, "What I can tell you is that this dosanut, we won't abide by that anymore, right?" So, like, I think that's one guy saying one thing that could have been interpreted as a sort of peace thing, and then, like, even in the sense of like the other side, I think it's a stupid thing to come out with. Like, you didn't agree that, and you shouldn't have said it.
You and I talk about this though, and I guess the sentiment that I guess I was trying to show you in that video when you and I speak in the past, and you said, like, where we're trying to like bridge that gap or talk and understand where we're coming from. What he was saying, and obviously you and I disagree about this, but he feels like the other side wasn't accepting the rules of the game, right? He comes and says, like, ultimately, now you and I have gone back and forth about this, about saying, like, right, when it comes to this level and the game is not being played that way anymore, and you see what they're doing. So I totally hear you. I'm just saying, but that is where he's coming from. He's saying, like, a big part of that is coming from, I could only play with you, like you just said, if you're going to be if you're going to play by the rules. And like you said, there's going to go both ways, but that's his real sense. His real sense is that there is a game being played over here, which has alternative motives. And put aside that the interviewee, not the interviewee, the host over there, she was bananas, and very emotional. It's sad for me a little, because I do think he is actually someone that is very open-minded and very, very engaging, and has a much more universal outlook. Yet what you're seeing there, and I can understand why that makes you nervous, but that is also a religious response where he's saying, ultimately, like you said, Chazi, if you and I think we're just moving up at the same direction, right? Like, then we're all good. Like, we're moving up together, and hopefully we're going to find that truth. He does have a sense, right, where it's Jewish over democratic at the end of the day. Well, he totally appreciates the democratic system, and there's a certain sense in me which also believes that.
So, like, the issue, there are many issues there, right? Like the notion, like, you're not playing by the rules, right? I don't really buy that. That's like, it doesn't make sense that would be the explanation, right?
But I did just because you and I discussed this, and I said there's a lot of times where I could see where you're coming from, but my fear is how it's being framed, how the response is happening, and I feel like you would have had a lot more of the right with you, quote unquote, on the streets if it didn't manifest the way it manifested. And that's, like, I think there's a pushback, which is,
what specifically?
Well, I told you that when you hear things that are misconstrued in the media, or when you see things like, we spoke about this, protesters not getting arrested, or closing down the highway, or the rate of how it's done, or people being called out, and some of these are anecdotal, but and then you blame the right media. And I'm saying I blame the right media for pushing that, but you hear about, like, the doctors are not going to now treat the patients anymore. And then you hear about one story of, like, someone says something stupid, and now suddenly all the doctors are bad. But that created a scenario where it's very much them or us. You could argue that a rabbi and a very influential one at that should be able to see above that and try to. And that's why, like, seeing the picture of them meeting together, I was happy about. And then hearing that conversation, I wasn't sending you that as being like, check out, like, checkmate. It was more just.
I mean, I understood that. That's kind of what made me frustrated, because to me, like, there is what I got from it. Like I said, I don't think it's just all of those elements, like not playing the game right, the way it manifested. like the undertone of the whole interaction was, a very combative one, and one that does not, like you said, posel lachalutin is a very strong term. Like, are they Nazis? What do you mean posel lachalutin?
But I would say, like, no. So he's saying, I posel chalutin, I completely reject their vision, which you could be like, the way he interprets what their vision is or how they want to go about it. That I would still say I don't think he rejects them at all as human beings. I don't think he belittles them as their soul, and I think I'm positive he loves them and has them in a very high regard as far as who they are. I say that genuinely.
What?
I say that because when you say it's combative, the terms of achim laneshek, right, brothers in arms, right, and the term of when you hear that, and this is not all, but like the terms used on ultra orthodox, or like, enemies, or blood sucking people, or there are terms that are being used which are horrible on, and it's not about whataboutism, but like on both sides, which I'm with you, but like to come and say, like, to use that term, you're right. It's they shouldn't use that term, but like that goes about everyone. And if we're going to use that, then like, I don't even know how we, like, I agree with you. You're right. We shouldn't use that term, but the waters are so dirtied. And like we talk about the Israel-Palestine, like war crime. Great. So America does a war crime, and Ukraine does a war crime, and Russia does a war crime, and England does a war crime, and everyone does war crime. So is it called a war crime anymore? And it's not like my higher standard. You bombed Fallujah. You did this. So I don't know. I did the knock. I told them to go. Am I not, like, at this point, like, the high standard? Be like, no. Like, there's another level to that. So yes, you're right. The rabbi should have gone in, and he has the crown of Torah on his head. And ideally, he would have seen through and come out with a more positive message.
So to me, that sort of reminds me of the story of, I don't remember which rabbi it was, but the rabbi and the ugly man, right? Like he comes out of his tower, and his mind was crude from studying Torah so much. This like dato ita gasalav.
Right.
And he sees this man walking near him when he's on his mount, on his donkey, and he says, "Hey, is everyone from your village as ugly as you?" Right? And then this guy is saying, "Oh, well, you should ask the craftsman that made me."
Right.
And then this rabbi is completely, whitening. His face turns white. He gets off his donkey and he asks for forgiveness, and the ugly man is like, "Not until you ask this guy." And he goes to all of the, he follows him and begs for forgiveness, and the people in the city, when they reach the city, are going like, "Yeah, stop, stop teasing him, just forgive him," right? It's like he's a good man, and like, don't hold this grudge or something, and that's sort of the end of that story. But to me, like, there's a sense in which, like, I feel that from the religious world constantly, like, what they have to say to me is everyone in your village as ugly as you, right? Like the sense that, like, there's in this case, like we're talking about, these are people who did amazing things with no consideration to who is it being done for. Like, there was nothing about it that was like, we will take care of our own or whatever, or of the people. Many of the people, because it's the South and it's Sderot and Ofakim, many of the people they helped were calling them traitors and anarchists and whatever names were applied to them, like moments before that, right? And like that's, to me, right, there's a certain respect that is due to that was not given.
By the way, like, definitely on his end, and he should have said a lot more about, like, a lot more than just like, he gave them like the 1 minute of, they did a lot of stuff, and it's nice to see they did work, but like, there should have been a lot more love there. And even when Jacob goes to meet Esau, right, there's prayer and there's preparation for battle, but there's also doron, there's gifts, and there's like, so just even at the tactical level, like it's a shame that that's not happening. However, when I hear you say, like, moments ago they were calling them like, anarchists, and the 40% of the religious soldiers that have died in this current battle, right? Like the soldiers they're fighting because of the Jewish element of the state, and they're dying for these people that are also calling them not traitors but fascists, or like anyone over there that was quote unquote voting right, also was called out of, like, seen as the other. And I'm saying that's what's also so sad, which is both these sides are obviously, we are clearly one nation, and we're clearly brothers, and we're clearly, once push comes to shove, right? Like you just said, they're not differentiating between whether they're helping an ultra-Orthodox, an Ethiopian woman, a Yemenite person. Everyone's getting the love. And the soldier that's giving his life is not thinking, I'm only doing this, I'm risking my life just for the right wing and not for the left wing. But like,
well, look, there's two elements to that, and I think they apply for both, right? There's the element of the tribe uniting against a common enemy. Like an external enemy comes and the two tribes stop fighting and unite. Like historically, it's what happens. And like, I don't think it's something to be disregarded. And I think like the level of willingness to contribute in any way is not something trivial, and it's not something that would happen anywhere else, in these levels. And we talked about it. But like when you put it down like to politics, right? Like there is a sense that, right, when you see some willingness to go and say like, actually, let's have a dialogue, right? And I think Brothers in Arms did like more than you could expect from them in this situation, to say like, we're meeting with those people that we were fighting against. And I definitely don't think it was ideal, right? But like, all things considered, I think a very courageous gesture.
He did say that before October 7th, there was no place for dialogue. And he said that he's been in like different conversations and meetings like that they tried to have in the past. And he did say that at the very least that this is, I mean, we also have to take a step back and say, we have to be real with ourselves. There was a tremendous amount of tension that was built up over 9 months, 10 months. You have this war, and now you have this meeting, right? So you could be like, we're both like, why wasn't it more productive? But it could be that like, we hope that the next 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings will be more productive. And like, we're right now calling it as this one. And I'm saying,
you're right. But I'll try to focus my point, because I think I've strayed a bit from the, like, what I find most
disturbing
about it. And that's that I would like to have a conversation, if a conversation is possible, right? If someone needs to be more than one person, but like I'm talking about like the grander level. And I think this example of Uri Shirky is relevant because he's more influential than Chazi, right? He's in a higher position. People listen to him, look up to him. And to me, like, it was very disparaging to see, right, like, that even if I can talk to you, the people, right, like one level up in terms of influential like the influence they have, right, it's already like, oh, actually, we're just fighting, and the purpose is to harness people like Gilad to do what we want, because we know what needs to happen. And like, it's all about getting what our agendas are. It's not about like dialogue. It's not about
Getting what I missed.
getting our agendas through.
So like you're saying like a very Machiavellian attitude about it. Let's just get it done.
The idea like that for me is like I can totally relate with someone who's saying, you know, I really think that I'm onto something, but I have the humility to say that I need like if you want to frame it religiously, the kingdom of Israel in order to see things as they are, right? Like to actually reach the truth. And maybe like, because we're close to finish, it's something I wanted to say for a few meetings, that you had this complaint about Gilad Kariv putting the two pictures of the Declaration of Independence near to the Book of Torah. And the thing that bothered me about that when I thought about it later, that, you know, you had a problem with it, it's like, if it were God in the other picture, I'm with you. But it wasn't. It was a Torah book. And
which represents
but no, it represents religiosity, and religiosity is not God.
No.
That's my point here.
But
right? Like, maybe it does. Maybe we disagree on what it represents. But let's say, in my interpretation, like that's where I think a lot of the animosity comes from, because when I see a lot of the talk in more religious circles, it seems to me like they're conflating the derech, the religiosity, the path to get closer to God, as God. Like that is the highest thing. It can't be the highest thing. That's idolatry.
1,000%. But I'm saying when I look at that, and I would say, I mean, also in it's the circles I'm in, while I'm not saying what you're saying isn't foreign to me it's not. It's very clear that, you know, that represents the word of God, right? It's a holy script that we've studied and memorized and learned. So I'm saying it represents God's will, right? We recognize what God's wisdom is in the world, and we see that through the term Elohim, and we also understand God's will through His words that He given us, and through his these interpretations over the years. So I agree with you that it becomes very problematic where it's the inverse of Lo Bashamayim, right? Why it's so beautiful, that beautiful tractate in Gemara, the Talmud, about how ultimately the rabbis say, you know, the Torah, the heavens are for God, and the Torah was given to us. And the idea is that this is ours to now play with in co-creation with God. Like we said, like what God allows Adam to name the animals, right? So very, very unique. You're right that in exile, it turned into that the Torah, in a certain sense, has become the authority, which, like, you know, that we can't shake from that. So I'm with you. That is a problem. And that, again, but to me, that is a response, that is a reaction to how Judaism manifests politically in Israel, and has manifested politically in Israel. And while I could, quote unquote, point fingers at the left for the things that I'm not happy that they take on and their attitude, and obviously I need to look inwards. We are not producing leaders that are getting up there, are inspiring, or are managing to purvey a message that resonates with more people. And not that I don't think you can't find that, like you did in your classes when you were in your own seminary, right? Clearly there was a teacher over there that did a great job, and you would be like, I would totally be fine hearing this guy speak in the Knesset, but like, that's not the guy running for power. And that is I completely accept you putting that, let's say, at the table of, let's say, the religious leadership, and where we are politically on the right, and saying, like, you know, well, what do you expect us to react when this is what we see? You're right. To me, though, what I expect is someone to be like Echad Ha'am and be like, well, I know that's not what Judaism represents, and I know it represents more than that. What Gilad Kariv to me is doing, like, it represents these democratic, like, no, it's a much bigger story than the democratic values, which are great and are a subset, and their undergirding powers are, I believe, from a theological origin at the end of the day. But I don't see enough people like you where I feel like saying, like, no, I don't want to lose up on that. I don't want to lose on my Jewishness, even though I don't express that the way necessarily Jews have for, well, arguably you do express it that way.
I would say about that, maybe, like, I don't want to ruin your image, but I do want to correct, because I want to be representative of what I actually feel is like. I feel privileged to be able to actually study these amazing texts. I do not feel committed to them, right?
Okay.
I'm definitely committed to the Ten Commandments. I think most
So
of Western society, right? Like,
correct. We're all in the game already. So like, and that's.
But like when they tell me, when I read Masechet Sotah, and it says about, like we talked about it, what you should do to a woman that's suspected of, cheating on her husband, and I say, like, like, it's not interesting for me. It's not an inspiring text. It doesn't inform my life, and I wouldn't, like, have the ability to act better having now read that and followed its orders, right? So for me, I don't know if, like, that's right to put it there, but that's what I always saw as the difference between secular Judaism, that is, like, scholarly or learned, let's say, is better than scholarly, to religious, to the religious approach, which is like, we are committed to this. Like Leibowitz said, if Chazal said read a phone book, I would read a phone book.
So while I understand and I'm sensitive to that sentiment, right, of the kol asher yerucha lo tasur yamin u'shmol, right? Like, there's attitude of, like, this is what you got to do, and obviously, like, that is held up against the Christians in a certain sense of, like, there's no way, like, JC came down because, like, our system was, like, really, stick within the lines. However, again, that is certain interpretations. I'm not saying it's a minority, but, like, I'm saying that's not all interpretations are that way, and I would say that even texts about an adulterous woman, there is something to be learned over there that I believe that you could even find value in today. Like I'm saying, in those teachings, and again, it depends on what level you want to be exploring and interpreting these texts. But if the point is there's some things that are no longer relevant, sure. Are there some things that are not only no longer relevant, but maybe, like, they require an update to become, like, more, like, a lot more relevant and potentially a lot more influential? Also true. And this is also a state that, I don't know, religious people don't say enough. Like, we are not living the ideal right now. This is all, like, we're in this default mode. Like, this isn't what it's the model looks like, right? We had a temple, there was different practices. So, like, now, when you say committed, I feel committed to make a blessing before I eat, right? But it's not of my, using the term, like, fear of God, I'm going to be punished from the man in the sky. It's the recognition of, like, when I hold this apple and the work that was entailed to get this food. And you could look at it from, like, a modern perspective of, like, the farmer and the business and the cleaning, but also just the fact that these things have been created, that I have taste buds. That makes me feel compelled to recognize my creator, how terrified I am, and how honored I feel and blessed I feel that I could be participating in this. And you can be like, right, that's just my mindfulness app also tells me to do those things. So
I don't have a mindfulness app.
So am I committed to it? I'm committed to it, just like you're committed on, like, as far as you're saying, being a good citizen or acting with the way you think is acting in a moral sense. So I think that in a certain sense, you are committed to Judaism. I'm not, like, putting it on your head, in your own version and how that manifests for you. Yes, there's things that, like, I wear these 4 fringes because I think I'm committed to it. I also have the understanding of, I'm wearing a turtleneck right now that doesn't have 4 fringes on it. So I really don't have to have it on. And if I have it on at night, so there's.
But don't you think that the mitzvot shimiyot is exactly that sort of thing? Like, even by definition, it's like, you're committed to this. do this. And like I know that there are like spiritual aspects, and definitely when you think of Kabbalah and everything, but the way I at least read the Rambam and many of his um, students, or later
Yeah.
that follow his orders,
Commentaries.
like you should just do it. Like that's just something you should do. It's not like, and to me, like I said, I don't feel that sort of necessity, that sort of pull that says like, right, I do feel it, and this is something from Leibowitz, right, like where the head of my secular yeshiva was in the car with him when he was a teenager. He was driving him to give a lecture, because he gave lectures anywhere that people asked. And he asked him, he was also already considering like leaving the religious life, and asked him, but why be religious? Like, what's the cause for it? So Leibowitz told him, like, there's a demand that you follow 613 laws. And he said, demand by whom? What do you mean? Leibowitz said, like, is there a demand for you to be a good person? He said, yes. The same way. Right? Like, and for me, I really value that claim. And especially in the sense that, like, I don't feel it, and there isn't an argument to be made. Like, you should be a good person. Why? You just should. Okay? Like, that's really the way I think, like, the thing it boils down to. It's not a falsifiable thing. It's not.
Right. So I agree. And arguably you would say that Judaism was a great iOS system of doing the right thing and living a good life for many, many, many years.
Yeah,
And
I think like many
so,
Judaism, as well as other traditions that some
Yep.
better, some
Yep.
worse.
And more than that, I feel like while I have like a eschatological vision, which ultimately, whether the world is full of Noahides or there's recognition in God, right? I still think there's an interest. God is interested in the house of prayer for all nations. While there's uniformity, there's still an interest of the other cultures, right? This is all part of one tapestry. And it's very important for me to see how the East and how the Romans and how the Italians and how what their culture is and how it gets to also benefit and upgrade my culture and my religion as well. So, to be continued. Much appreciated taking the time.
You too.
I hope we have, as we enter Shabbat, I hope we have a restful Shabbat, that we find peace and tranquility and menuchat nefesh, restful soul for all of us. A great weekend. Catch you on the flip. What a good dude. Oh, wow. Look at all these comments. Sorry. I see comments over here. Oh, wow. Even Paul is here. True but strange. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore at this point. Andrew, what's going on? I hope all is well. Keeping those comments going. Nathaniel, hello, sir. Father Eric, hopefully we kept you entertained. I see you're still here, so I guess we did a good job. Very nice. Emma, hello and goodbye. Sandy, shalom. Ben C. So laying some good, interesting wisdom over here. And Parky, minty, fresh, mug, root beer. Okay, good luck with that. All right. See you guys later.